I was checking the reservation list for Thanksgiving week when I saw it. Mitchell, party of 5. My family's name right there on the screen, booked for 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day. 5 people, not 6. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at the reservation, my finger hovering over the tablet, suddenly feeling like that invisible child again. They hadn't even bothered to tell me they were coming to Portland, let alone that they'd be dining at Autumn Harvest, my restaurant. The one they had no idea I owned. Growing up as the middle child in the Mitchell family meant living in the shadows. My older brother Jason was the golden boy, college football star turned successful business executive. My younger sister Megan was the baby, the talented one, the one who got all the attention with her singing and acting. And then there was me, Rebecca, though everyone called me Becca. The quiet one, the responsible one, the one they somehow always managed to forget. I can still hear my mother's voice when I called home from culinary school. Cooking? Really, Becca? It's just a hobby, sweetheart. You should focus on something practical, like accounting. Not everyone is meant to stand. Out. Dad would just grunt in agreement, barely looking up from his newspaper. Jason would smirk and say, "Someone's got to make the sandwiches, right, sis?" And Megan would be too busy talking about her latest audition to even acknowledge I was on the phone. I believed them for too long. I let their dismissive attitudes seep into my bones until I started to question my own dreams. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't special. Maybe my love for food, for creating experiences through taste, wasn't worth pursuing. But something inside me refused to give up completely. I took their advice partially. I got that accounting degree they wanted, but every weekend, every holiday break, I was in the kitchen. I took night classes at the local culinary institute. I apprenticed under chefs for free just to learn. And when I graduated with my practical degree, I shocked everyone by announcing I was moving to Portland to pursue my culinary career. Portland? My mother had exclaimed, her voice pitched with disapproval. What's in Portland? Who do you even know there? You've never lived away from home. That's exactly the point, I had replied, surprising myself with my firmness. I need to find out who I am away from here. My father had sighed heavily. Don't come running back when you fail, Rebecca. We won't say we told you so, but... He let the sentence hang, the implication clear. Jason had laughed. Little Becca in the big city. This should be interesting. Only Megan had seemed momentarily interested. Bring me back some of those weird donuts they have, she'd said, before immediately returning to her phone. That was 6 years ago. 6 years since I packed everything I owned into my beat-up Honda and drove nearly 1,000 miles to a city where I knew no one. Those first years were harder than I could have imagined. I worked double shifts as a line cook while doing bookkeeping on the side to make ends meet. I lived in a studio apartment so small I could touch both walls with my arms outstretched. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I care to admit. But I also found something I'd never had before. Respect. The head chef at Portside Bistro, where I worked, actually listened to my ideas. He noticed my dedication, my precision, my creativity. "You've got a gift, Becca," he told me one night after service. The first time anyone had ever suggested I might be special. Don't waste it. When Sofia Alvarez, a regular customer and successful restaurateur, asked to speak with the person who created the special that night, my special, I was terrified. I walked out of the kitchen, my chef's coat stained with work, my hands raw, from hours of cooking. Sofia looked me up and down, then smiled. "You have a unique perspective," she said. "Food isn't just sustenance to you, it's language." Sofia became my mentor. She showed me the business side of restaurants, taught me how to create not just dishes but experiences. And when a small, struggling farm-to-table place came up for sale downtown, she was the one who convinced me to take the risk. I can't afford it, I protested, looking at the numbers. You can with investors, Sophia replied, and I'm your first one. She slid a check across the table that made my eyes widen. Portland needs your voice, Becca. I'm just making sure they hear it. With Sophia's investment and my own savings, plus a business loan that terrified me, I bought the restaurant. I renamed it Autumn Harvest, completely renovated the space, and created a menu that told my story through food. Comfort dishes elevated through technique and imagination. Flavors that reminded people of home, but better than they remembered. The first year was brutal. I worked 18-hour days, slept on a cot in the office, and second-guessed every decision. But slowly, people started coming. Then they started talking. A small write-up in the local paper, a mention in a food blog. Then, a glowing review from the city's toughest critic that brought tears to my eyes. Mitchell doesn't just feed you, she tells you a story with every bite. By year 3, we were fully booked most nights. By year 5, we had expanded and I had a team of 20. Autumn Harvest became known as one of Portland's essential dining experiences, especially during the holidays when my special seasonal menus shined. Sophia had been right. I did have a voice, and finally, people were listening. Through it all, my family remained distant. I called home regularly those first few years, but the conversations were always the same. My mother would ask when I was coming to my senses and moving back. My father would inquire about my savings, assuming I was barely scraping by. Jason would talk about his promotions and vacations. Megan would dominate the call with stories about her burgeoning acting career in local theater. Not once did they ask about my restaurant. Not once did they suggest visiting. Eventually, the calls became less frequent and more strained. Last Thanksgiving, when I mentioned I couldn't come home because the restaurant was fully booked and I needed to be there, my mother had sighed dramatically. "It's your family, Rebecca. Surely they can manage without you for one day. It's not like you're the owner." I had almost told her then, almost said, "Actually, I am the owner." But something stopped me. Maybe it was the realization that she wouldn't believe me. Or worse, that she would somehow diminish this too, find a way to make my success sound like a fluke or a small accomplishment not worth mentioning. So I had swallowed the truth and simply said, "I can't make it. I'm sorry." "Well, we'll miss you, I suppose," she had replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Jason's bringing his new girlfriend. She's a lawyer, you know. And Megan's got a callback for a national commercial. It would have been nice to have the whole family together." After hanging up, I had walked through my restaurant, touching the tables, watching my staff prepare for service, and realized something profound. I had built a new family here. People who saw me, who valued my vision, who respected my work. Now, staring at that reservation, Mitchell, party of 5, I felt a complex tangle of emotions. Hurt that they were coming to Portland without telling me. Anger that they still didn't think to include me in their Thanksgiving plans. And beneath it all, a spark of something dangerous and delicious. Anticipation. They had no idea that the restaurant they'd chosen for their Thanksgiving dinner, probably based on online reviews or a recommendation from one of Jason's business contacts, belonged to me. That the chef whose food they would be eating, the owner whose vision shaped every aspect of the experience, was the daughter they had dismissed for years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I had a choice to make. I could call them, reveal the truth, maybe even extend an olive branch. Or I could let them walk in, unsuspecting, and discover the reality in real time. It wasn't just about revenge, though I can't deny the appeal of seeing their faces when they realized the truth. It was about finally being seen, on my terms, in the world I had created. I took a deep breath and made my decision. I wouldn't warn them. I wouldn't give them time to prepare their reactions or craft dismissive responses. For once, the Mitchell family would experience me exactly as I was, not as they had always assumed me to be. I added a note to the reservation. VIP guests. Owner will handle personally. Then I closed the tablet and went back to work, the familiar rhythm of the kitchen calming my nerves as I planned exactly how this Thanksgiving surprise would unfold. The week leading up to Thanksgiving was always chaotic at Autumn Harvest. We were fully booked, with a waiting list a mile long. My executive, Chef Marcus, and I had spent weeks perfecting the holiday menu, balancing traditional flavors with unexpected twists. The centerpiece was my signature dish, a heritage turkey with cranberry juniper glaze, served with foraged mushroom stuffing and charred maple Brussels sprouts. It was the taste of my childhood Thanksgivings, reinvented through years of professional experience and personal growth. As Thursday approached, I found myself obsessively checking the Mitchell reservation, half expecting them to cancel. They didn't. I also kept waiting for a text or call. Surely they would reach out if they were coming to my city. But my phone remained silent on that front too. On Thanksgiving morning, I arrived at the restaurant at 5 a.m. The kitchen was already humming with activity, prep cooks chopping, bakers sliding loaves into ovens, the gentle hiss of stock pots simmering on back burners. I tied my apron with hands that weren't quite steady, earning a concerned look from Marcus. "You good, chef?" he asked, pausing in his inspection of the turkey delivery. "My family's coming in tonight," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. "They don't know I own this place." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The family that never visits? The ones who think you're still playing restaurant?" He'd heard enough stories over late-night staff meals to know the broad strokes. I nodded, suddenly unable to elaborate. "Well," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Should be an interesting service, then." With a knowing grin, he added, "Don't worry, we've got your back." As the day progressed, I threw myself into work, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, inspecting every plate before it left the kitchen. The dining room filled with the first seating of guests at noon, families and friends celebrating together, exactly the atmosphere I had envisioned when creating Autumn Harvest. Usually, this was my favorite part, seeing people connect over the food I had helped create. Today, I could barely focus on anything except the clock slowly ticking toward 6 p.m. At 5:30, I took a break to change out of my kitchen whites and into the outfit I'd brought specially for this occasion, a simple but elegant black dress with a caramel-colored blazer that brought out the gold in my hazel eyes. I twisted my hair up into a neat bun and applied a touch of makeup. Looking in the small mirror of the office bathroom, I hardly recognized myself. Gone was the unsure girl from Lake Oswego who had let her family's expectations define her worth. In her place stood a woman who had built something real, something valuable, against all odds. "You've got this," I whispered to my reflection, willing the butterflies in my stomach to settle. At 5:55, I positioned myself near the host stand, pretending to review the seating chart while keeping an eye on the door. Sophia, who had insisted on being there for moral support, stood nearby, sipping a glass of the Pinot Noir we sourced from a small Willamette Valley vineyard. "Remember," she said quietly, "no matter what happens, you've already won. This," she gestured around the bustling restaurant, "is proof of that." The door opened at 6:02, and there they were. My father first, still tall but more stooped than I remembered, his hair now fully gray. My mother behind him, perfectly coiffed as always, her critical gaze already scanning the restaurant. Jason followed, his arm around a slender blonde woman, I assumed was the lawyer girlfriend. And Megan, bringing up the rear, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover in a dress that probably cost more than my first month's rent in Portland. 5 people, not 6. The confirmation felt like a small stab, even though I'd been expecting it. My host, Aiden, greeted them with a warm smile. "Good evening," Welcome to Autumn Harvest. Name for the reservation? Mitchell, my father said, his voice carrying that note of authority he'd always used when he expected special treatment. Party of 5. Aiden checked the tablet, his professional demeanor never slipping even though I knew he was fully aware of the situation. Ah, yes. Mr. Mitchell, we've been expecting you. Your table is ready, and I see there's a note here that the owner will be handling your service personally this evening. My mother looked surprised. The owner? Why would... It's a special touch we offer to guests visiting from out of town, Aiden improvised smoothly. If you'll follow me. As he led them toward the best table in the house, the one by the window with views of the river and the twinkling lights of the city beyond, I took a steadying breath and nodded to Sophia. It was time. I approached the table just as they were. Being seated, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they must hear it. For a moment, no one noticed me. They were too busy commenting on the restaurant, the view, the ambient lighting, the tantalizing smells wafting from the kitchen. Then my mother looked up, her eyes passing over me before snapping back in sudden recognition. "Rebecca!" she gasped. The rest of the family turned in unison, expressions of shock rippling across their faces. "Becca?" Jason squinted as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, the professional smile I'd perfected over years of interacting with guests, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. "Welcome to Autumn Harvest. I understand you're visiting from Lake Oswego." My father frowned, confusion evident. "Yes. But do you work here?" There it was, the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I straightened my shoulders and looked him directly in the eye. "Actually, Dad, I own this restaurant. I'm the executive chef and founder of Autumn Harvest." Silence fell over the table, so complete I could hear the soft music playing overhead, the murmur of nearby diners, the clink of glasses from the bar. My mother recovered first. "You own this place?" Her gaze swept around the restaurant again, this time seeing it differently. "But how? When?" "For 5 years now," I replied, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. "We've been written up in Food and Wine. The Times called us one of the best new restaurants in the Pacific Northwest. Last year I was nominated for a James Beard Award." Jason's girlfriend, whose name I still didn't know, broke the family tension with genuine enthusiasm. "Oh my God, this is your restaurant? Everyone at the firm has been trying to get reservations here for months." I couldn't believe it when Jason said he managed to book a table for Thanksgiving. Jason himself looked like he'd swallowed something sour. "Why didn't you tell us?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with unspoken history. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming to Portland?" I countered quietly. More silence. My mother had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "We didn't want to bother you," she finally said. "We know how busy you are with... Well, I guess this explains it." She gestured vaguely at the restaurant. "We were going to surprise you tomorrow, see where you worked." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. For years, they hadn't bothered to ask about my work, about my life. And now they were claiming they didn't want to bother me? Megan, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly burst out, "Wait, so all those times you couldn't come home for holidays?" "I was here," I confirmed, "running this place, creating something I'm proud of." My father cleared his throat, looking, both confused and slightly impressed despite himself. "Well, I'll be damned." Our Becca, a restaurant owner. There was an uncomfortable silence at the table as my family tried to process what was happening. I could almost see the wheels turning in their heads, recalibrating everything they thought they knew about me. The sister they had written off as unremarkable was standing before them as the owner of one of Portland's most acclaimed restaurants. "I've arranged a special tasting menu for you tonight," I said, slipping back into my professional persona. "Unless you'd prefer to order from the regular menu?" "The tasting menu sounds wonderful," Jason's girlfriend said enthusiastically, seemingly oblivious to the tension. I'm Elise, by the way. I've heard so much about you. I smiled at her, genuinely this time. Have you? That's surprising. The comment landed exactly as I intended. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while my mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Perhaps I should send over some champagne to start, I suggested, already signaling to one of my waitstaff. We have a lovely local sparkling wine that pairs beautifully with the first course. As I walked away to give them space to collect themselves, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. For years, I had imagined this moment. The moment they would finally see me, really see me. Now that it was happening, it felt different than I had anticipated. Less triumphant, more bittersweet. In the kitchen, I threw myself into preparation, personally overseeing each dish that would go to their table. My sous chef, Danielle, worked alongside me, eyeing me with concern. Everything okay, chef? She asked quietly as we plated the amuse-bouche. Delicate. Pastry cups filled with whipped goat cheese, topped with roasted beet, and a drizzle of aged balsamic. My family's here, I replied, focusing intensely on placing a microgreen garnish just so. Table 12. Danielle's eyebrows shot up. The ones who, yep, I cut her off. The very same. She nodded, understanding immediately. The staff at Autumn Harvest was like a second family to me. They'd heard stories over the years, fragments shared during late-night cleanup or celebratory drinks after busy services. Then these plates need to be perfect, she said simply, inspecting each one with extra care. I carried out the first course myself, accompanied by a server who poured the sparkling wine. As I approached, I could tell they had been discussing me. They fell silent as I neared, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. This is a Pacific Northwest take on traditional appetizers, I explained, setting down the plates. The pastry is made with local flour, the beets are from a farm just outside the city, and the goat cheese comes from a small producer in the Willamette Valley. My father picked up his fork, examining the dish with skepticism. Looks fancy. It's beautiful, Elise countered, already taking a photo with her phone. This is incredible, Becca. As they tasted the first bites, I saw surprise register on their faces, even my father's. The combination of flavors was unexpected, but harmonious, a perfect reflection of the cooking philosophy I'd developed over the years. This is, actually, really good, Jason admitted, sounding surprised. Actually? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. He had the grace to look embarrassed. You know what I mean. I don't think I do, I replied. But enjoy. Your next course will be out shortly. Back in the kitchen, I focused on the rhythm of service, the familiar dance of plating and timing that usually centered me. Tonight, though, my hands weren't quite steady. Memories kept intruding, snippets of conversations, dismissive comments, all the times my family had made me feel small. I remembered the Christmas when I was 16, when I'd spent days making an elaborate bûche de Noël from scratch. My mother had looked at it and said, "That's nice, dear, but we already bought one from the bakery, maybe next time." I remembered how Jason had laughed when I mentioned applying to culinary school, saying, "Come on, Becca, you're not exactly top chef material." I remembered how my father had refused to help with tuition, telling me, "We're not wasting money on cooking classes. That's not a real career." Those memories had fueled me for years, pushing me to prove them wrong. But now, with them sitting in my restaurant, those old wounds felt raw again. The second course was a delicate soup, parsnip and pear with a swirl of brown butter and sage. As I delivered it, my mother reached out and touched my arm, stopping me. "Rebecca, I don't understand why you never told us about all this," she said, gesturing around the restaurant. "This is impressive." The word hung in the air between us. impressive. As if my success was a complete surprise to her. As if she couldn't conceive of her middle child, her unremarkable daughter, building something worthy of admiration. "Would you have believed me if I had told you?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "We always knew you were capable," my father interjected, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We just worried about the, stability of a career in food." "And yet, here we are," I replied. "Enjoy your soup. The temperature contrast is intentional." As the meal progressed through each carefully crafted course, I watched my family's reactions evolve. Their initial shock gave way to genuine appreciation, at least for the food. Megan, who had barely spoken since my reveal, finally broke her silence during the main course, the heritage turkey that had become my signature dish. "This is nothing like Mom's turkey," she declared after her first bite, not unkindly. "It's so moist, and the flavors are incredible." "Thank you," I said simply. "How did you learn to cook like this?" she asked, seeming genuinely curious, for the first time in our adult relationship. I paused, considering my answer. Practice, study, failure, more practice. I met her eyes, and believing I had something worth saying through food, even when no one else did. The table fell silent again, the weight of my words settling over them. Jason stared intently at his plate. My mother looked like she might cry. My father cleared his throat repeatedly, a habit he'd always had when uncomfortable. Only Elise seemed unaffected by the tension. "This is seriously the best Thanksgiving meal I've ever had," she enthused. "Jason mentioned you were working in a restaurant, but he never said you were a chef owner of a place like this." I glanced at Jason, who had the decency to look ashamed. "Did he? That's generous. Last I heard, he was telling people I was still figuring things out." "I didn't know," Jason muttered. "How was I supposed to know you'd built all this?" "You could have asked," I replied simply. "Any of you could have asked, at any point in the last 6 years, what exactly I was doing in Portland. You could have visited. You could have shown even a passing interest in my life." The rawness in my voice surprised even me. I hadn't planned to be so direct, but standing there, watching them enjoy the fruits of my labor while acting as if my success had appeared out of nowhere, something broke loose inside me. "I invited you all to the grand opening," I continued, the words tumbling out now. "I sent formal invitations. None of you came. None of you even responded." My mother's eyes widened. "We never received any invitations." "I sent them to the house," I said, "and I called to follow up. Dad answered and said you were all busy that weekend." My father shifted uncomfortably. "I don't remember that." "Convenient," I murmured, then louder. "Your dessert will be out shortly." I retreated to the kitchen, my emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Sophia was there, her presence a steadying force. "How's it going out there?" she asked, helping to plate the dessert, a deconstructed pumpkin pie with spiced meringue, candied pecans, and a quenelle of maple bourbon ice cream. "About as well as could be expected," I replied, focusing on the precise placement of each element. "They're impressed with the food, at least." Sophia gave me a knowing look. "But that's not enough, is it?" I shook my head, unable to articulate exactly what I was feeling. Pride in what I'd built, certainly. Satisfaction at their obvious surprise and admiration. But also a deep, lingering hurt that it had taken this. A successful restaurant. Critical. Acclaim, a James Beard nomination. For them to see any value in my choices. "You know," Sophia said gently, "sometimes people can only see us through the lens of who they think we are. It takes something dramatic to crack that lens. Like discovering your supposedly directionless daughter owns the restaurant you randomly chose for Thanksgiving dinner?" I asked with a wry smile. Exactly like that, she agreed, squeezing my shoulder. The question is, now that the lens is cracked, what do you want them to see? It was a good question. What did I want from this encounter? Vindication? Apology? Recognition? Or something deeper? A genuine connection, perhaps, based on who I actually was, rather than who they had always assumed me to be? By the time I carried out the dessert plates, I still didn't have an answer. But as I approached the table, I noticed something had shifted. They weren't just eating the food anymore, they were truly experiencing it. My mother was closing her eyes as she savored a bite. My father was discussing the flavor combinations with Jason. Megan was examining each component with genuine interest. For the first time, they were engaging with my work, with my art, in a meaningful way. It wasn't the same as engaging with me, but it was a start. This is our take on traditional pumpkin pie, I explained, setting down the plates. We make the ice cream in-house, and the pecans are candied with a whisper of ghost pepper for a subtle heat that balances the sweetness. It's exquisite, my mother said, looking up at me with what appeared to be genuine awe. Rebecca, I had no idea you were capable of creating something like this. There it was again, the surprise that I could be exceptional, that I could be special, that I could create something beautiful and meaningful. That's the thing, Mom, I said quietly. You never bothered to find out what I was capable of. The table fell silent. Even the ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away as my words hung in the air between us. I think, my father said slowly, we may have underestimated you. It was perhaps the closest thing to an admission of wrongdoing I'd ever heard from him. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement at least. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. Megan looked up from her dessert, her expression uncharacteristically serious. Why didn't you make us see? Why didn't you fight harder to make us understand what you were doing? The question struck me as so fundamentally backward that I actually laughed. Why was that my responsibility? Why was it on me to convince my own family that I was worth believing in? We've always believed in you, my mother protested weakly. No, I countered. You believed in a version of me that you created, the quiet middle child who wasn't quite special enough to have dreams worth supporting. You never tried to see the real me. Jason, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. I'm sorry. Becca, I really am. I should have paid more attention. I should have asked more questions. His apology, unexpected and seemingly sincere, caught me off guard. I hadn't anticipated any of them taking responsibility, least of all Jason, who had always been the most dismissive of my ambitions. Thank you, I said after a moment. That means something. As they finished their desserts, I found myself at a crossroads. This confrontation, this revelation, had gone differently than I had imagined. There was no dramatic breakdown, no shouting match, no storming out. Instead, there was this strange, tentative space opening up between us, a space where, perhaps, we might begin to see each other clearly for the first time. We have a tradition here at Autumn Harvest, I said, making a decision. After the meal, the chef sometimes joins guests for a digestive, a small glass of something to help settle the food and continue the conversation. Would you like me to join you? It was an olive branch, small but significant, an invitation to extend this moment to see if there was something worth salvaging in our fractured relationship. My mother looked surprised, then pleased. We would love that, Rebecca. Give me a few minutes to check on the kitchen, I said, and then we'll talk, really talk. As I walked away, I felt a weight lifting, not entirely, but enough to breathe more easily. This Thanksgiving hadn't gone as any of us had planned. My family had come to Portland expecting a nice meal at a well-reviewed restaurant. Instead, they'd been confronted with the reality of who I had become in their absence. And I had expected vindication, the sweet satisfaction of finally making them see me. Instead, I was finding something more complicated, more nuanced, but perhaps more valuable. The possibility of building something new from the ashes of our old relationship. In the kitchen, Sophia caught my eye, raising an eyebrow in silent question. "I'm going to have a drink with them," I said. "Try to talk." She nodded approvingly. "Remember, you're not that invisible girl anymore. You're Chef Mitchell now, owner of Autumn Harvest. You negotiate from a position of strength." I smiled at her fierce protectiveness. I know who I am now. That's what matters. And it was true. Whatever happened next with my family, whether we found a way forward or simply acknowledged the broken pieces of our past, I knew myself in a way I never had growing up in their shadow. I had built a life, a career, a community that reflected the real me, not the limited version they had tried to impose. As I selected a special bottle of aged port to share with them, I realized that was the true victory of this Thanksgiving. Not making them see me, but seeing myself clearly enough to stand firmly in my own truth, regardless of their recognition. I returned to the table with a tray of small crystal glasses and a bottle of amber-colored port that had been aging in our cellar since I'd opened Autumn Harvest. The restaurant had begun to quiet down as the evening service wound toward its close. Most of the other diners had departed, leaving behind a peaceful ambiance, soft lighting, gentle music, the occasional clink of dishes from the kitchen where my staff was beginning cleanup. "This is a 20-year tawny port," I explained, setting down the glasses. "We usually reserve it for special occasions." "And is this a special occasion?" my father asked, his tone unreadable. I met his gaze directly. 5 years of not seeing my family, only to have them show up unannounced at my restaurant on Thanksgiving? I'd say that qualifies. His expression softened slightly. "Fair enough." I poured the port, a small amount in each glass, just enough to savor. The rich aroma of dried fruits, nuts, and spices filled the air between us. A perfect end to a Thanksgiving meal, I'd always thought. "To unexpected reunions," Elise offered, raising her glass. The gesture was well-intentioned, but it highlighted how little she understood of our family dynamics. No one else immediately raised their glasses. The weight of unspoken history hung heavy over the table. "To seeing people as they are, not as we expect them to be," I countered, lifting my own glass. It was both a toast and a challenge. One by one, they joined the toast. Megan was the last, her eyes meeting mine with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between resentment and respect. "I don't understand," she said after taking a small sip. "Why didn't you ever tell us how successful you'd become? It's like you wanted us to keep thinking you were struggling." The accusation stung, particularly because there was a grain of truth to it. I'd stopped trying to share my accomplishments with them years ago, tired of having them minimized or dismissed. "I did try," I said carefully. "Remember when I called after we got that first write-up in Portland Monthly? Mom answered and I started to tell her about it, but she interrupted to talk about your callback for that commercial." Megan had the grace to look embarrassed. My mother frowned, clearly not remembering the conversation. "Or when I emailed everyone photos after the renovation," I continued. "The only response I got was from Dad, asking if I was sure the loan was a good idea." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I was concerned about your financial stability." "No," I replied evenly. "You were convinced I would fail. There's a difference." Jason swirled the port in his glass, watching the legs form along the sides. "I think what Megan's trying to say is that you could have been more direct. You could have said, 'Hey, I'm actually doing really well here. I own this successful restaurant. You should visit?'" I felt a flare of anger. Why was that my responsibility? Why was the burden on me to convince my own family that my life was worth their interest? No one had an immediate answer. Jason looked away, discomfort evident in his posture. "It wasn't just about the restaurant," I continued, the words flowing more freely now. It was about everything. Do you know how it feels to grow up as the invisible middle child? To have your dreams dismissed as hobbies? To hear, year after year, that you're not quite special enough to deserve attention or support? We never said that, my mother protested weakly. You didn't have to say it explicitly. It was in every conversation, every family decision. It was in who got asked about their day at dinner and who didn't. It was in whose achievements got celebrated, and whose were treated as afterthoughts. My voice had risen slightly, and I took a deep breath to steady myself. This wasn't how I'd planned to spend Thanksgiving, laying bare years of accumulated hurt to a family who might not even recognize it. I'm sorry you felt that way, my father said stiffly. It was such a non-apology that I nearly laughed. I didn't feel any particular way, Dad. I experienced consistent neglect. There's a difference there, too. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother looked on the verge of tears, though whether from genuine remorse or self-pity, I couldn't tell. Jason studied his port glass with sudden, intense interest. Megan was the only one who held my gaze. I think, she said slowly, there might be truth to what you're saying. It was such an unexpected admission that I wasn't sure how to respond. I always wondered why you never fought for attention the way I did, she continued. I thought you just didn't want it. I never considered that you'd tried and given up. Her insight surprised me. Of all my family members, Megan had always seemed the most self-absorbed, the least likely to notice anyone else's struggles. I did fight for a while, I admitted. But it gets exhausting, constantly having to prove your worth to the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. My mother reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching mine. Rebecca, I had no idea you felt this way. We've always been proud of you. Have you? I challenged. Can you name one specific accomplishment of mine that you celebrated before tonight? One dream of mine that you actively supported? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Jason leaned forward, his business executive persona falling away for perhaps the first time since we were children. Look, Becca, we've clearly messed up here. Big time. But you've built something amazing. He gestured around the restaurant. And you did it without us. Maybe that's the point. I considered his words. There was truth in them. Would I have built Autumn Harvest if my family had been supportive? If they'd encouraged my culinary ambitions from the beginning? It was impossible to know. Perhaps their neglect had fueled a determination in me that might otherwise have remained dormant. Maybe, I conceded. But that doesn't make it right. No, he agreed. It doesn't. My father, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. I didn't think cooking was a real career. He said it plainly, without defensiveness. I was wrong. I can see that now. Coming from him, this was as close to a full apology as I'd ever received. My father, the stoic engineering professor who had never been wrong a day in his life, admitting a mistake. Thank you for saying that, I replied, genuinely touched. This port is exceptional, Elise commented, clearly trying to ease the tension. Did you select it yourself? I nodded, grateful for the momentary shift in conversation. Wine and spirits pairings are one of my specialties. We work with small producers, many of them local. Is that what this is all about for you? Megan asked suddenly. Proving us wrong? The question caught me off guard. No, I said after a moment's consideration. It's about proving myself right. There's a difference. She nodded slowly, as if truly seeing me for the first time. You always were the stubborn one. I had to be, I replied with a small smile. It was the only way to survive in this family, The comment could have landed harshly, but something in my tone must have softened it, because Megan actually laughed. A genuine sound that reminded me of when we were children, before competition and comparison had poisoned our relationship. "Remember when you insisted on baking your own birthday cake?" she asked. "You were what, 12? Mom tried to talk you out of it." I did remember. It had been a disaster, lopsided, unevenly frosted, but entirely mine. Mom said it wouldn't be as good as one from the bakery, but you did it anyway, Megan continued. And it was awful. "Hey," I protested, though I was smiling now too. "But it was yours," she finished. "I always admired that about you, even when I was busy being a brat." The admission surprised me. I'd never imagined Megan admiring anything about me. "I thought you didn't notice me at all," I said honestly. "Of course I noticed you," she replied. "You were the steady one. The one who always seemed to know exactly who she was, even when the rest of us were just trying on different personalities to see which one got the most attention." I blinked, trying to reconcile her perception with my own memories. Had I really seemed steady? Had I projected that kind of self-assurance even while feeling so overlooked? "I think we're all seeing things a bit differently tonight," my mother interjected. "Maybe that's what we needed, a chance to step outside our usual roles." I studied her face, looking for signs of the dismissive woman who had so consistently undermined my confidence. Instead, I saw someone older, more uncertain than I remembered. Someone trying, however imperfectly, to bridge the gap between us. "Maybe," I agreed cautiously. "This restaurant," my father said, looking around with newfound appreciation. "It's really something, Rebecca. You've created something exceptional here." The compliment, simple but sincere, warmed something in me that had been cold for a very long time. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. We fell into a more comfortable conversation then, discussing the restaurant, the challenges of running a business, the critical acclaim we'd received. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like my family was actually interested in hearing about my life, my work, my passion. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still old patterns threatening to reassert themselves. My mother still occasionally interrupted me. My father still asked pointed questions about finances. But there was a difference now, willingness to listen, to adjust, to see me as I was, rather than as they had always assumed me to be. As the evening drew to a close, I realized the restaurant was empty, except for our table. My staff had finished cleanup and were waiting discreetly for the family reunion to conclude so they could go home to what remained of their own Thanksgiving celebrations. "We should probably wrap up," I said, glancing at my watch. "My team has been here since dawn." "Of course," my mother said, gathering her purse. "This has been illuminating." "That's one word for it," I replied with a wry smile. "Do you have plans for tomorrow?" Jason asked suddenly. "We're in town until Sunday. Maybe we could get together again, all of us this time." He emphasized the last part pointedly. The invitation was unexpected. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect the fragile peace we'd established tonight. But another part recognized the olive branch for what it was. "I have brunch service until 2, I said, "but I'm free after that." "Perfect," Elise chimed in. "We could meet you here, or wherever you'd prefer." I considered the options. Meeting at the restaurant again would keep me on home territory, surrounded by the evidence of my success. But perhaps that wasn't what we needed for the next step. In this tentative reconciliation, "There's a coffee shop near the waterfront," I suggested. "Local place, great pastries. We could meet there at 3. "Sounds wonderful," my mother said, sounding relieved that I'd agreed. As they stood to leave, an awkward moment ensued. How does one say goodbye after such an evening? A handshake seemed too formal, but our usual distant nods felt inadequate. It was Megan who broke the stalemate, stepping forward and wrapping me in a brief but genuine hug. "The food was amazing," she whispered, "but I'm more impressed by you." The simple affirmation brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them back quickly as Jason followed with his own slightly awkward embrace. "I really am sorry," he murmured, "for not seeing you." "I know," I replied, surprised to find I believed him. My parents were more reserved, my father offering a firm handshake, my mother a quick kiss on the cheek. But there was something different in their eyes now, a respect that hadn't been there before. "Happy Thanksgiving, Rebecca," my mother said as they prepared to leave. "I think we all have something new to be thankful for this year." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without my voice betraying the emotion welling up inside me. As I watched them walk out of my restaurant, I felt Sophia's presence beside me. "Well?" she asked quietly. "How was it?" I took a deep breath considering the question. "Complicated," I finally said, "but maybe a beginning rather than an ending." She squeezed my shoulder gently. "Sometimes that's the best we can hope for with family." "Yeah," I agreed, still staring at the door long after they'd disappeared into the night. "Sometimes it is." The restaurant was silent now, the dining room dimmed, the kitchen clean and ready for tomorrow's service. I'd come in that morning prepared for battle, armored in my professional success and righteous anger. I was leaving with something far less clear-cut, but perhaps more valuable. The tentative foundation of a new relationship with my family, built on who we were now rather than who we had been. I wasn't naive enough to think one dinner had erased years of neglect and misunderstanding. Tomorrow might bring regression, old patterns reasserting themselves when the shock of discovery wore off. But for tonight at least we had seen each other clearly. For tonight that was enough. "Lock up for me?" I asked Sophia, handing her my keys. "I think I need to walk for a bit." She nodded understandingly, taking the keys. "Don't stay out too late. Brunch prep starts at 6. "I know," I assured her. "I just need some air." Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars visible despite the city lights. I turned toward the river, my breath forming clouds in the chilly air. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite. Holiday, a celebration of food, of gathering, of gratitude. For years, it had also been tinged with the pain of exclusion, of being forgotten by my own family. This year had been different, unexpected, imperfect, but somehow right. As I walked along the waterfront, watching the city lights reflect on the dark water, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in a very long time. I imagined what next Thanksgiving might look like. And for the first time in years, that imagination included my family, not as I wished they would be, but as they were, flawed, and finally beginning to see me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step toward something new. And in that moment, walking alone under the stars, I found myself genuinely thankful for the unexpected turn this holiday had taken. Morning came too quickly. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying every moment of the previous night's encounter. The shock on their faces when they realized I owned autumn harvest, the gradual thawing as the meal progressed, the tentative bridge we'd begun to build over port and painful truths. I arrived at the restaurant before dawn, as I always did on service days. There was something peaceful about the kitchen in those early hours. The gleaming stainless steel counters, the organized precision of the prep stations, the soft hum of the refrigerators. This was my domain, the world I'd built for myself far from the shadow of my family's expectations. My sous chef, Danielle, arrived shortly after I did, her eyebrows raising in surprise when she saw me already elbow-deep in prep work. "Thought you might take a late morning after last night," she said, tying her apron. "How'd it go with the family reunion?" I continued chopping herbs, the rhythmic motion soothing. "It was educational." She snorted. That bad, huh? Not bad exactly. Just complicated. I scooped the herbs into a container and moved on to the next task. We're meeting again this afternoon. Danielle paused in her own prep work, giving me a concerned look. You sure that's a good idea? You've spent years building this life without them. Why let them in now just because they finally noticed you're successful? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself since I'd agreed to meet them again. Why give them another chance? Why risk reopening wounds that had just begun to heal? I'm not doing it for them, I said finally. I'm doing it for me. I need to know if there's anything worth salvaging. She nodded, accepting my answer without further comment. That was one of the things I valued most about my team. They understood boundaries, both professional and personal. Brunch service was busy, as it always was the day after Thanksgiving. Locals bringing out-of-town guests, families looking for someone else to cook after yesterday's marathon, couples enjoying a leisurely start to the holiday weekend. I lost myself in the familiar rhythm of the kitchen, calling orders, inspecting plates, orchestrating the dance of servers and line cooks. This was where I felt most confident, most myself. In this space, there was no question of my worth, my talent, my authority. Every dish that left the kitchen carried my vision, my standards, my story. As service wound down, Sophia appeared at the kitchen door, her expression unreadable. "Your 3 o'clock is set," she said. "I've arranged for a private table at Riverfront. Coffee. Told them you might need some space." I smiled gratefully. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she replied simply. "Family reunions should have neutral territory and privacy, especially complicated ones." I glanced at the clock, just past 2. Service was winding down, and Danielle had everything under control for the turnover to dinner prep. "Go," Sophia said, following my gaze. "Get changed. Process whatever happened last night. Prepare yourself for round 2. She was right, as usual. I needed a moment to transition from Chef Mitchell to Becca, from the confident business owner to the woman still navigating the complicated emotions of family reconciliation. In my office, I changed out of my chef whites into the clothes I'd brought for the meeting. Dark jeans, a soft sweater in deep teal, low boots. Professional but approachable. Armor of a different sort. As I walked to the coffee shop, the crisp November air cleared my head. What did I want from this meeting? Not apologies exactly. Those felt too little, too late. Not validation. I'd found that for myself, in the work I'd built, the team I'd assembled, the recognition I'd earned. Perhaps just understanding. A chance to be seen clearly, finally, by the people who should have seen me all along. Riverfront Coffee occupied a converted warehouse space with high ceilings, exposed brick, and large windows overlooking the water. True to Sophia's word, they'd reserved a corner table, partially screened by a bookshelf, offering both privacy and a view. My family was already there when I arrived, seated around the table with steaming mugs. They looked up as I approached, their expressions a mix of nervousness and anticipation. It struck me how different they seemed from my childhood memories. Older, yes, but also somehow less imposing. My father's shoulders, once so broad and straight, were slightly stooped. My mother's carefully maintained appearance couldn't quite hide the lines around her eyes. Jason looked tired, the polish of his business persona showing cracks. Even Megan seemed softer, less performative in her movements. "Sorry I'm a bit late," I said, taking the empty seat. "Brunch service ran over." "No problem at all," my mother replied quickly, her smile slightly too bright. "We were just enjoying the coffee. It's wonderful." "They get their beans from a roaster in Eastern Oregon," I said. "Small batch, sustainable practices." "You know everyone in the food scene, don't you?" Jason asked, sounding genuinely curious, rather than dismissive. I shrugged. It's a tight community. We support each other. A server approached, and I ordered a cappuccino, grateful for the brief interruption. When she left, an awkward silence fell over the table. So, my father said finally, clearing his throat. Your restaurant. It's quite impressive. Thank you, I replied, accepting the compliment at face value. How long did it take you to build it to this level? He asked, his engineer's mind clearly wanting quantifiable data. About 5 years from opening to where we are now, I answered. Though the first 2 were touch and go. Most restaurants fail in the first year. He nodded thoughtfully. And you did the renovation yourself? The design? With a contractor, yes. I had a specific vision for the space. As we talked about the practical aspects of the restaurant, the business plan, the staffing, the critical reviews, I realized my father was trying, in his own way, to understand the scope of what I'd built. He didn't have the vocabulary to discuss the creative elements of my work, but he could appreciate the structural accomplishment, the problem-solving, the persistence required. You must have worked incredibly hard, he said finally, an unmistakable note of respect in his voice. I did, I acknowledged. Still do. I wish we'd seen it sooner, my mother interjected. I wish we'd understood what you were building here. The server returned with my cappuccino, buying me a moment to consider my response. I wish you had too, I said finally. But I'm not sure you would have believed it even if you'd seen it. You had such fixed ideas about who I was, what I was capable of. That's not fair, Rebecca, my mother protested. We always wanted what was best for you. What you thought was best, I corrected gently. Not what I knew was best for myself. We were trying to protect you, she insisted. The restaurant industry is so competitive, so unstable. We didn't want you to get hurt. I took a sip of my cappuccino, letting the rich flavor ground me. Mom, being dismissed by my own family hurt far more than any professional setback ever could. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I hadn't meant to be cruel, only honest. But the truth often feels like an attack to those who've spent years avoiding it. I think what Mom's trying to say, Megan intervened, is that we made mistakes. Big ones. We didn't see you clearly, and that's on us, not you. I studied my sister, surprised again by her insight. When did you get so self-aware? She smiled ruefully. Therapy, lots of it. Turns out being the family star comes with its own issues. Like what? I asked, genuinely curious. She glanced at our parents, who seemed slightly uncomfortable with this turn in the conversation. Like never feeling you can fail. Like wondering if people love you for who you are, or what you achieve. Like suspecting your entire personality is just a performance designed to keep the spotlight on you. Her candor took me aback. This wasn't the self-absorbed sister I remembered. I had no idea, I admitted. Of course not, she replied. We're all too busy playing our assigned roles to really see each other. Jason, who had been unusually quiet, leaned forward. That's what I've been thinking about since last night. We all got locked into these family roles so early that we never had a chance to evolve past them. You were the invisible middle child. I was the golden boy. Megan was the baby star. Mom was the manager. Dad was the authority. And we just calcified there. It was a startlingly accurate assessment from someone I'd always considered emotionally obtuse. What changed for you? I asked him. He exchanged a glance with Elise. Actually, Elise called me out pretty hard after we started. Dating. Said I talked about my family like we were characters in a sitcom, not real people with depth and complexity. Elise smiled sheepishly. I might have used stronger language than that. The point is, Jason continued, she made me realize I'd stopped seeing any of you as you actually are, including myself. My father cleared his throat. I think we all got comfortable with those roles. It was easier than adapting as you children grew and changed. It was perhaps the most psychologically astute thing I'd ever heard him say. So where does that leave us now? I asked, looking around the table. The roles don't fit anymore. They probably never did, but we've spent decades relating to each other through them. We start over, my mother suggested, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. Get to know each other as we are now, not as we remember being. It sounded simple when she said it like that, but I knew it would be anything but. Years of patterns, expectations, and hurts couldn't be erased by one Thanksgiving dinner revelation, no matter how dramatic. I'd like that, I said cautiously. But I need you to understand something first. I'm not the same person who left Lake Oswego 6 years ago. I won't shrink myself to fit into anyone's expectations anymore, not even yours. We wouldn't want you to, my father said, surprising me with his firmness. What you've built here, it's extraordinary, Rebecca. You were right, and we were wrong. About your potential, your dreams, all of it. The admission, so direct and unequivocal, left me momentarily speechless. My father had never been one to admit mistakes, let alone so completely. Thank you, I managed finally. That means a lot. We're proud of you, my mother added, reaching for my hand across the table. I know we haven't earned the right to say that yet, but we are. I let her take my hand, feeling the slight tremble in her fingers. You're right, you haven't earned it yet, but I appreciate the sentiment. The honesty seemed to surprise her, but she nodded, accepting the boundary. So what now? Jason asked. Practically speaking, where do we go from here? It was a good question. We couldn't erase the past, and one weekend wouldn't bridge the gap of years. We needed something sustainable, something that acknowledged both the damage done and the possibility of something new. We start small, I suggested. Regular calls, maybe. Not just the surface-level check-ins we used to do, but actual conversations. About our lives, our work, the things that matter to us. I'd like that, Megan said, nodding. And visits, my mother added hopefully. Not just holidays, but real visits. We could come to Portland more often, see your restaurant in operation. You could come home when your schedule allows. The thought of returning to Lake Oswego still filled me with a certain dread, but I recognized the importance of the gesture. Maybe for a weekend sometime. Not a holiday, though. Not yet. They seemed to understand the distinction. Holidays carried too much weight, too many expectations and memories. What about Christmas? My father asked, clearly not grasping the nuance. It's only a few weeks away. I shook my head. The restaurant is fully booked for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. We do a special tasting menu that's been in the works for months. I can't leave my team during our busiest season. He looked disappointed, but nodded. Of course. Your business comes first. It's not just a business, Dad, I explained. It's my life's work. My team depends on me, and I on them. We're a family. Of sorts. A chosen family, Elise said with understanding. Exactly, I agreed, grateful for her insight. Well, we're still your family too, my mother said, a note of possessiveness creeping into her voice. Your first family. I recognized the old pattern emerging, the expectation that blood ties trumped all other connections, that family loyalty should supersede personal boundaries. It would have been easy to fall back into the familiar dynamic, to acquiesce, to keep the peace, but I wasn't that person anymore. You are my family, I acknowledged. But that doesn't automatically give you priority over the relationships and commitments I've built for myself. That's something you'll need to understand if we're going to move forward. My mother looked like she wanted to argue, but my father placed a hand over hers, silencing whatever she'd been about to say. We understand, he said, though whether he was speaking for himself or both of them wasn't clear. As our coffee cups emptied and the afternoon light shifted through the windows, I felt a cautious optimism taking root. This wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It wasn't a Hollywood reunion with tears and embraces and instant healing. It was messier, more tentative, more real. A first step on a path that might, with time and effort, lead to a new kind of relationship. I should get back to the restaurant soon, I said, checking the time. Dinner service starts at 5. Of course, Jason said. We don't want to keep you from your work. When do you head back to Lake Oswego? I asked. Sunday afternoon, my mother replied. We have a late checkout from the hotel. I made a quick calculation in my head. Saturday was always our busiest night, but Sunday brunch was manageable with Danielle at the helm. If you're free Sunday morning, I suggested, I could show you around the restaurant before opening, give you the behind-the-scenes tour. The offer surprised them. And, honestly, it surprised me too. But it felt right. If we were going to build something new, it had to start with genuine sharing, with allowing them to see the world I'd created. We'd love that, my father said, genuine. Enthusiasm in his voice. Wouldn't we, Karen? My mother nodded, a real smile replacing her usual polite one. Absolutely. I'd like to meet your team, see your kitchen. Then it's settled, I said, standing up. Sunday at 9 before brunch service begins. As we said our goodbyes, still slightly awkward, still finding our way, I realized something had shifted within me. The anger that had fueled me for so long, the need to prove myself to them, had begun to loosen its hold. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but it no longer defined my relationship with them. Walking back to autumn harvest through the late autumn afternoon, I felt lighter somehow. This Thanksgiving hadn't gone according to anyone's plan. My family hadn't expected to discover their overlooked middle child was a successful chef owner. I hadn't expected to begin the process of reconciliation after years of estrangement. But sometimes, I reflected, the unexpected turns out to be exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it. As I approached my restaurant, its windows beginning to glow against the gathering dusk, I allowed myself to hope, cautiously, realistically, that this might be one of those times. Sunday morning arrived with a pale winter sun streaming through my apartment windows. I'd given myself the luxury of sleeping until 7, practically a vacation in chef hours, before heading to autumn harvest to prepare for my family's visit. The restaurant was quiet, the dining room chairs still upturned on tables, the kitchen spotless after last night's service. I moved through the space with purpose, setting up a small breakfast spread in the private dining room, fresh pastries, seasonal fruit, coffee from the same roaster as Riverfront. Sophia arrived as I was arranging flowers on the table, watching me with an amused expression. "You're nervous," she observed, helping herself to a croissant. "I'm not nervous," I protested automatically. Then, catching her knowing look, I sighed. "Fine. Maybe a little." "It's okay to care about what they think, she said, perching on the edge of the table. "Doesn't make you that invisible girl again." I adjusted a napkin that was already perfectly aligned. "I know, it's just complicated." "Family always is," she replied simply. "But bringing them here, showing them your world on your terms, that's power, Becca, not vulnerability." She was right, as usual. This was my domain, my creation, the physical manifestation of everything I'd built since leaving Lake Oswego. Here, I stood on solid ground. "Will you stay?" I asked her. "I'd like them to meet you." Sophia smiled warmly. "Of course, I wouldn't miss it." At precisely 9, the front door chimed. I straightened my chef's jacket, casual today, without the formal whites of service, and went to greet them. They stood somewhat awkwardly in the entryway, dressed nicely but comfortably, for their trip home later. My mother held a small gift bag, which she extended toward me almost shyly. "We brought you something," she said. "It's not much, just a small thank you for yesterday." I accepted the bag with surprise. "You didn't have to do that." "We wanted to," my father replied. Inside was a beautiful ceramic spoon rest, hand-painted with autumn leaves in rich golds and burgundies. It was thoughtful, relevant to my life, rather than what they thought my life should be. A small thing, but significant. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "It's perfect for my home kitchen." "We thought you might like the colors," Megan added. "They match your restaurant's palette." I nodded, appreciating that they had noticed such a detail. "Come in. I've set up breakfast in the private dining room. Then I'll show you around." As we settled around the table, my family seemed more relaxed than they had at either of our previous encounters. Jason and Elise asked questions about the pastries, where they were from, what made them special. My father examined the coffee setup with interest, asking about brewing methods and bean origins. Even my mother seemed genuinely engaged, complimenting the flour arrangement rather than suggesting how it could be improved. Sophia joined us, and I made introductions. "This is Sophia Alvarez, my mentor and first investor. Without her, Autumn Harvest wouldn't exist." "You're being modest," Sophia countered, shaking hands with everyone. "The vision was all yours. I just helped with logistics." "It was more than that," I insisted. "You believed in me when nobody else did." The words hung in the air, not accusatory but honest. My family absorbed them, nodding in acknowledgement rather than becoming defensive. "We're grateful to you for that," my father said to Sophia, "for seeing what we missed." Sophia regarded him thoughtfully. "Becca has extraordinary talent, but more importantly, she has the determination to match it. That's rare." "We're beginning to understand that," my mother said quietly. After breakfast, I led them through the restaurant, starting with the dining room. I explained the design choices, the reclaimed wood tables, the lighting that shifted throughout the day to create different atmospheres, the local art rotating on the walls. "The acoustics are intentional," I explained, pointing out the ceiling treatments. "I wanted conversation to flow easily without tables overhearing each other. Food is communal, but dining should still feel intimate." Next came the wine cellar, where my father seemed particularly impressed by the organizational system I'd developed. "This is ingenious," he said, examining the temperature zones and tracking software. "Did you engineer this yourself?" "With help from an HVAC specialist," I replied, "but the concept was mine." He nodded, a new respect in his eyes. Very efficient, very smart. But it was the kitchen that truly captivated them. I showed them each station, explained the workflow, demonstrated some of the specialized equipment. My mother ran her hand along the custom butcher block island at the center. "You designed all this?" she asked, taking in the immaculate space. "Every inch," I confirmed. "A kitchen has to function like a well-oiled machine during service. Every movement counts." Jason whistled softly. "It's like mission control. I had no idea there was so much precision involved." "That's what most people don't understand about professional cooking," I explained, warming to the subject. "It's not just creativity. It's science, logistics, management, psychology, all happening simultaneously under intense pressure." My family listened attentively as I explained our sourcing philosophy, our relationship with local farmers, our commitment to sustainable practices. They asked thoughtful questions, engaged with the information, showed genuine interest in understanding the complexities of the business I'd built. "And this is your office?" Megan asked as we came to the small room tucked behind the kitchen. I nodded, opening the door to reveal my workspace, organized chaos, with cookbooks stacked alongside vendor catalogs, menu drafts pinned to a large corkboard, and a desk that served as both administrative center and creative workshop. It's not much, but it's where the magic happens, I said lightly. Menu development, ordering, staff scheduling, all the behind-the-scenes work. My mother wandered over to the corkboard, studying the menu iterations pinned there. These are all handwritten, she observed. You still plan everything on paper first. I think better with a pen in my hand, I replied. Always have. I remember, she said softly. You used to write little menus for your tea parties with your stuffed animals. Every detail planned out, even then. The memory caught me off guard. Not because it wasn't true, but because I hadn't realized she had noticed, had remembered such a small detail from my childhood. You were always so organized, she continued, so certain about what you wanted to create. I didn't know how to respond. This acknowledgement of who I had been, even as a child, felt significant somehow. As we completed the tour, returning to the main dining room where the staff was now setting up for brunch service, my family seemed to be seeing me, really seeing me, in a new light. This is extraordinary, Rebecca, my father said, gesturing around the space. What you've built here, what you've become. I wish we had understood sooner. So do I replied honestly. But maybe we can understand each other better moving forward. My mother hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been on her mind. Will you consider coming home for a visit sometime? Not for Christmas, I understand that's impossible. But perhaps in the new year? I considered the request, weighing my readiness against the importance of reciprocating their effort. I could probably manage a weekend in February, I offered. After Valentine's Day service, the restaurant is closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. The joy on her face was genuine. We'd love that, whenever works with your schedule. You have to. Try Becca's Valentine's special, Elise enthused. Jason, can we come back up for that? It's probably amazing. Her enthusiasm made me smile. It sells out pretty quickly, but I can hold a table for you if you'd like. Absolutely, Jason replied. Maybe we could make it a regular thing, coming up to Portland for special menus throughout the year. The suggestion surprised me. Not just the desire to return, but the implication of an ongoing connection, a new tradition centered around my work rather than old family patterns. I'd like that, I said, meaning it. As brunch staff began arriving, moving efficiently through their opening routines under Danielle's watchful eye, it was clear our time was winding down. My family had a 3-hour drive ahead of them, and I needed to prepare for service. We moved toward the entrance, the moment of goodbye approaching. But unlike our previous partings, this one felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. Thank you for showing us your world, my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. I understand now why you love it so much. It took a lot of work to build, I replied. But it's worth it. This place, these people, they're my heart. And we're still your family, she added, reaching for my hand. If you'll have us? The question was sincere, acknowledging that the choice was mine, that reconciliation wasn't automatic, but earned. I think we're finding our way there, I said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. My father, never one for emotional displays, cleared his throat. We're very proud of you, Rebecca. What you've accomplished here is remarkable. I was wrong about your path, and I'm sorry for that. The direct apology, so unlike him, moved me more than I had expected. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. Jason stepped forward next, offering a hug that felt more genuine than any we'd shared in years. This isn't goodbye, he said firmly. It's just until next time. February, I confirmed. For Valentine's weekend. Megan's embrace was the biggest surprise, warm, tight, and lingering. I've missed you, she whispered. The real you, not the shadow I thought I knew. I've missed you too, I replied, surprised to find it was true. Beneath the rivalry and resentment, there had always been a bond between us. Fragile, perhaps, but real. As they walked to their car, I stood in the doorway of Autumn Harvest, watching them go with mixed emotions. This Thanksgiving had unfolded in ways none of us could have predicted. The family that had excluded me, overlooked me, dismissed me, for years had finally begun to see me clearly. And I, in turn, had started to see them not as the monolithic forces of my childhood, but as complex, flawed humans capable of growth and change. Sophia appeared beside me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded, watching their car pull away from the curb. "I think I am." "They're trying," she observed. "That counts for something." "It does," I agreed. "It's not everything, but it's a start." We turned back into the restaurant together, where Danielle was calling the pre-service meeting to order. Staff gathered attentively around the central station. These people, my chosen family, had seen me, supported me, believed in me when no one else had. That foundation wouldn't change, regardless of how things evolved with my birth family. "Chef?" Danielle called. "We're ready when you are." I moved to the head of the table, looking around at the faces of my team. "Today's brunch is full capacity," I began, slipping easily into my role. "Let's make it special." As we moved through service, the familiar rhythm of the kitchen wrapped around me like a protective cocoon. This was still my sanctuary, my creation, the place where I was most fully myself. The reconciliation with my family, however tentative, hadn't changed that fundamental truth. What it had changed, perhaps, was the weight I carried, the burden of invisibility I'd shouldered for so long. Being seen, truly seen by the people who had overlooked me for years had lifted something I hadn't realized was so heavy. Between courses, I found myself in a quiet moment at the pass, watching as servers whisked plates out to waiting guests. Sophia sidled up beside me, following my gaze. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I considered the question, searching for the right words. "I'm thinking that sometimes the most unexpected meals turn out to be the most memorable." She laughed, understanding the metaphor. "Like a Thanksgiving dinner that starts with a reservation shock and ends with a family reconnection?" "Exactly," I smiled. "Not what anyone ordered, but maybe what everyone needed." "Speaking of what everyone needs," she replied, "Table 7 is asking to compliment the chef personally. Apparently, your hollandaise has changed their lives." I laughed, the sound light and genuine. "Well, we can't keep them waiting, can we?" As I moved through my restaurant toward Table 7, I felt centered in a way I hadn't experienced before. The path forward with my family wouldn't be perfect or easy. There would be missteps, old patterns reasserting themselves, new boundaries to establish. But for the first time, that path existed. Not because I had made myself small enough to fit their expectations, but because they had finally expanded their vision to see me as I truly was. And in the end, isn't that what we all want? Not to be perfect in someone else's eyes, but to be seen completely and loved anyway. Not despite our choices, but because of them. Not for who we might have been, but for who we have become. Table 7 was waiting, eager to express their appreciation for a meal that had moved them. I straightened my chef's jacket, lifted my chin, and stepped forward to receive their compliments, not as the invisible middle child, but as Chef Rebecca Mitchell, creator of Autumn Harvest, author of her own story. The journey hadn't ended. In many ways, it was just beginning. But this Thanksgiving had marked a turning point, the moment when being excluded had led, unexpectedly, to being truly seen. And for that, despite everything, I found myself genuinely thankful. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.